There's only a little time left to enter to win Cap's shield. So all you need to do to enter is like this video, subscribe to the Marvelous Wave, and tell us below who your favorite Marvel villain is. Then head over to Twitter and tweet us at @stupendousswave with hashtag the Marvelous Wave. The winner will be announced on March 19th with the release of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So a couple days ago, one of our subscribers left a comment in one of our videos that we thought was very interesting. Steven Friedman posted, "Technically there are two timelines that the Avengers saved, since the timeline they went to retrieve the Power Stone no longer has Thanos because they killed him off." This is an awesome theory, so thank you, Steven. It got us thinking just how many timelines might be out there. Since Endgame is all about time travel and they explain it in such a way that affecting the past timelines doesn't affect the current timeline but actually branches off new timelines, how many of those new timelines were inadvertently created because of the actions of the Avengers? In the Marvel multiverse as a whole, there are near endless universes out there. From different comic storylines to TV shows and even movies, all are technically separate universes that exist in tandem in Marvel. As we know in the comics, the main universe is Earth 616, and the MCU is technically Earth 19999. Since there are so many universes out there, from the viewpoint of someone living in one of those universes, it is because of the different choices that were made, forming new and interesting timelines. And now with the events of Endgame, how many active timelines have now been formed in the MCU itself? And then also, how do these timelines form and how do they maintain themselves, and will they eventually remerge into the main timeline? The first alternate timeline we know about for sure is Loki's timeline. We know about this simply because he's getting his own show. We also know that somehow this timeline might get fixed because of the Time Variance Authority's involvement in Loki. We won't talk too much on this one right now because the show will be coming out in June and we want to save all our predictions before it comes out. The second timeline that was formed was the one that Steven Friedman proposed. And it makes a lot of sense because now that Thanos has been removed from the universe, how does he affect the events of Infinity War in the alternate timeline? Since Iron Man snapped them out of existence, and since Captain America returned the stones, re-merging the timelines back into the original, as directed by the Ancient One, the Avengers in the 2014 timeline probably will never see Thanos or have to deal with his allies who are seeking the stones. But then there's also the possibility, based on a deleted scene from Endgame, that many of the Avengers themselves are no more. In this scene, when Thanos emerges from the 2014 timeline, he throws down the head of Captain America, meaning he went and killed the Avengers from that timeline, erasing them, removing a majority of the heroes and villains from that timeline. But since that deleted scene was never shown, it's probably more likely that they survived on their own without the interference of Thanos. And what may be going on in this timeline? Especially because the biggest change is that of the Guardians. Because not only has Thanos been removed from the timeline, but Gamora has too. Meaning that the Guardians may never actually get together and save Xandar. But it also may mean that Ronan doesn't have the appropriate allies to retrieve him the Power Stone. And again, fast forwarding to Infinity War. It simply wouldn't happen, at least by Thanos' hands. Instead, there are probably other stories that come out of it, of the Infinity Stones constantly trading hands as those who seek power constantly steal them and use them to gain dominance over others in the universe. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we see an Infinity War level event not happen in that alternate timeline, as Thanos is not the only one who knows the powers of the stones and can use the Infinity Gauntlet to shape the universe to their will. And although we will probably never see this timeline, and probably never even see it re-merged into the main timeline, it probably does exist and we as fans can theorize what is going on. But at the same time, with the Multiverse of Madness and many of the other stories that are being proposed in the MCU, we may see hints of this, hints that a different universe occurred where the trials of the Infinity War never happened. And if there is a merging, it probably wouldn't happen for a very long time, as the difference between these timelines is so vast that to bridge it would take many, many years. The third timeline that was formed, that was confirmed by the Russo brothers, is Steve Rogers' timeline. This is the timeline where he stays with Peggy and lives his life with her. While we do know that the timeline does remerge as Captain America returns to give Sam the shield, what happened during this time, since they couldn't have just been dancing for all those years? I for one think that this would end up making a great TV show in future phases. More of an anthology of Steve and Peggy's adventures. But that's just my opinion. But if something like this did happen, what are some possible stories that we could see from it? One possibility is a team-up with Captain Britain. His inclusion into the MCU was teased in Endgame when Steve hides in Peggy Carter's office and hears her mention Braddock, obviously a reference to Brian Braddock, who is Captain Britain in the comics. And they could all be fighting Hydra, as Cap has inside knowledge that Hydra is attempting to infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D. And then seeing as part of this time covers the Cold War, it could also show some fights with communists and the USSR, including Black Widow's teachers and former allies. And then they could also be teaming up once again with the Howling Commandos, facing threats with the team he once had in World War II. And then there's more timelines on top of these ones that are a bit more solid due to the events that were so major that changed the timelines. Some of these minor ones, although less likely and most likely to have merged very quickly, such as the stones being returned to their rightful place in history, include any events that may have happened when Captain America was returning the stones, as he was only one man doing the job that it took a whole team to do at first, and then also the glove being removed from the timeline that Hawkeye went back to test the time machine. But even with all of these theories and all of these possibilities, there are still some questions of whether they will actually happen or did actually happen. Per the Hulk and the Ancient Ones conversation, these timelines may not have changed as much once the stones were put back. And from the sounds of it, it seems like the only way to make a different timeline is to remove one of the stones, just as Loki did, creating his own timeline. And also Captain America may have put the Space Stone back last so that he could be with Peggy. So if this is the case, there are really only 3 timelines. And then there's also the possibility that when Iron Man snapped his fingers, he sent Thanos and his minions back into their timeline, likely without any knowledge of what happened. But that wouldn't explain why Gamora got to stay, if she actually did, which is heavily hinted at because Star-Lord is obviously going to be looking for her in the Guardians of the Galaxy 3. And then since it seems that the timelines remerge eventually, just as Cap's did, how exactly might that have happened, especially because Captain America's history of himself is significantly different from what happened to him before. And then with Loki as well, when will he remerge if that is the case? We have already theorized that Loki died in Thor: The Dark World, and the one we see from then on is the Loki from Loki's timeline. But then there's still the possibility that he'll just show up again in Thor: Love and Thunder as the brand new Loki altogether. And then there's still the possibility that all of these timelines could show up in the Multiverse of Madness, as some multiverse theories are based on differences in timelines rather than completely different dimensions. Either way, it would be interesting to see more of each of these stories, and we already know that we get to see more of Loki's because of his popularity as a character. And although we probably won't see a story for Captain America and Peggy, and the idea of a completely new 2014 timeline based on Thanos' disappearance will probably never come up again, it would be great to see these timelines show up so we could see just how different the universe could have been without Thanos' snap. What do you think of this theory? How many timelines do you think Endgame created, and what is going on in these timelines? And if there really is more than one major timeline, do you think we'll see them, and would you like to? Thank you so much for watching, my fellow watchers. Please like this video and subscribe to The Marvelous Wave to assemble and join our team, and have a great day.